Hello and welcome to another video. My name is Ben Hales with Transform My Poker, and today we have one of the most popular themes: how to beat the loose passive games. I know that this is one of the most popular themes because I answer tons of emails about it, and invariably it'll go something like, I play in this game where everybody limps in and sees the flop, and invariably somebody gets lucky, and how do I beat these games? So today's video is going to be specifically for you who plays in those situations: how to beat loose passive opponents, how to beat these games. So first of all, I'm going to describe what loose passive games are, and on the next slide we'll tackle how to beat them. Okay? So for those of you who are a bit confused by the terminology loose passive, what does all this mean? Let's just make sure we're all on the same page. Loose means that we're playing lots and lots of hands. So in a loose game, you're going to see lots of players playing lots of hands. And the most common way in which you're going to see them enter the pot is by limping. So one of the first characteristics of a loose passive game is seeing many players seeing a flop, and these tend to be low stakes games, free money games. So like on the poker apps like Facebook, you'll see games that are very loose and passive, and the higher up the stakes you go, the less likely you are to see lots of players playing loose and passive, because this is the worst style of poker to be playing. It's going to be the style that loses the most money. So actually beating these players, it should be easy. It should be easy. You should be able to do this. All right. The second thing that characterizes loose passive games is when you notice lots of players calling too often. So both pre-flop and post-flop, they'll call bets. And this is a symptom of passive play. So rather than re-raising or betting, they will tend to limp, check, call. These actions are passive actions. So you will notice lots of checking and calling and not much betting and raising. Okay? So that's what loose passive games are, what we can expect to see when we're involved in a loose passive game. Now, how do we beat them? This is the juicy bit. 5 pieces of advice. First up, we need to try and isolate. You will hear this specific piece of advice given many times in poker. I like to use this a lot as a phrase, and you should think about what it means. When you're trying to make a raise pre-flop, for example, what are you really trying to do? First goal is to make everyone fold and win. That's a good goal. You take all the money on the table, there's no further risk. Thank you very much. So everybody folding is a good result. The second thing that you should be trying to do is to isolate to one opponent, and that might mean having to make quite a big raise in a loose passive game. So rather than raising to just 3 times the big blind, like might be a normal bet size, you may need to choose 4, 5, 6, 7 times the big blind in order to isolate down to one opponent. Sometimes even then you get 2 or 3 callers, right? You know, you've played in these games, I have as well. People like to call too much. If they're calling too much, narrow your range, bet more for value, don't do any bluffing, and make huge raise sizes with good hands. That's how we win money. So make sure that you're betting enough to isolate or make everybody fold. My second piece of advice is to stop bluffing, at least until you know that an opponent is folding too much in a certain spot. Most of the time, loose passive games are going to consist of players who call too often, and they're not the guys to be bluffing against. You want to be focusing on the value part of your hand. So when you've got a good hand, you extract lots of value from it, but you don't focus on bluffing, at least until you're aware of an opponent's weakness of folding too much. Most of these players won't have that weakness, so be careful with bluffing. My third bit of advice is to increase the bet sizes that you're making when value betting. Not only are players calling too often, but they're calling too much. So if they've got a flush draw, you don't need to bet half the pot. You can bet a lot more than half the pot. They're going to call anyway, and that's a good thing. Yeah, sometimes they hit their draw. Sometimes they do, and they win some big money. But most of the time they're not hitting their draw, and you're extracting more value by making them pay more to see that draw. So focus on large bet sizes and extracting the maximum amount of money you can from these loose passive opponents. The fourth point, this is huge. Don't ever forget this fourth point. When you're playing against loose passive players, when they raise or they make an aggressive play, that is your alarm bell. That means, they've got a big hand. Because passive players don't use aggression unless they have a strong holding. It's usually going to be a sign they've got two pair or more, otherwise they would just be calling. And for that reason, you should be folding whenever they show aggression, unless you're holding a monster. The final point I'd like to make in this video is that the types of players we're talking about that frequent these games are not going to be thinking players. They're not going to know about what ranges they should be playing. They may be sitting at home watching the TV with their feet up. They're not really serious poker players. So don't go into too much depth with your analysis and expect the unexpected. They could turn up with King 3 in a spot where it seemed impossible for them to be there with King 3. They may turn up with Ace when they didn't make any bets. You just don't know what to expect from these types of players. There's often no logic at all behind their decision making, and for you to try and apply logic is a flaw in your own game. So don't blame them for your mistakes. You've got to expect the unexpected. All you need to do is follow these simple rules, and you will find exploiting these games relatively straightforward. Stick to tight ranges, bet hard and strong for value, isolate your bad opponents, try to be in position, don't do too much bluffing, expect the unexpected. My name's Ben Hales with Transform My Poker. Go and beat those loose passive games. If you like the video, give it a Facebook like. Add your comments and questions. I'll try and get back to you. Catch you later.